Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cedarville Stories Podcast. I'm Mark Weinstein, and today you are in for a special treat because we get to hear the story of Hayley Good, a recent graduate of Cedarville's nursing program whose life has gone full circle, which I'll explain in a moment. But before I get there, I want to introduce you to a new video podcast that you can watch on YouTube. So the Cedarville Stories Podcast is both in audio and video formats. So you get to choose how you learn about these amazing stories that come from Cedarville University. For today's podcast, Hayley Good lived the first month of her life in the neonatal intensive care unit at Nationwide Children's Hospital. She was born in just 24 weeks, weighing less than 2 pounds. And it's obvious she survived, and today she's thriving as a neonatal intensive care unit nurse in the same NICU unit where she began her life. I know you're going to enjoy hearing Hayley's story today, so grab a tissue and a cup of tea as I begin my conversation with Hayley Good. So Hayley, the stage is set to talk about your full circle life in the neonatal intensive care unit at Nationwide Children's Hospital. But before we get there, let's talk about your willingness to really share your story in a very candid way with media all across the country. Why did you feel it was important for you to share your story once you were contacted by Cedarville's PR department?
I felt it was important because ever since, I have known my story myself. Sure. My parents have, told me growing up. It's something that we've always been, I shouldn't be here to begin with.
Right. And
so there's a purpose in that, and the Lord has a purpose in my life. And so when you guys reached out and I thought about it and I prayed about it, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to be able to share my story, but also give glory to God for saving me and then all that he's done since then.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like a good opportunity to be able to share that on a platform like Cedarville's. We all have like-minded values, and so it was really important for me to share it on something like that.
And not only did he save you once, he saved you twice.
Mm-hmm.
He saved you physically and spiritually. Mm-hmm. Interesting to me, as I've listened to faculty, listened to people who've heard your story, but primarily the faculty, the nursing faculty, many of them were surprised to hear of your story. They didn't know about it until after it came out through us. Are you a person who just tries to stay private and quiet, or just didn't feel like that you needed to share it?
I wouldn't consider myself a quiet person to begin with. I actually am usually pretty talkative and outgoing and open, but I guess my story was just something that never came up to begin with, something that I would share. And it is something that means a lot to me. So it's not something that I just, hi, my name's Hayley, and I just share my...
I shouldn't be here.
Yeah. So it was just something that never came up, especially with professors being in that, student-professor relationship. And so it was just something that never came up. And so when it was time to share it, a lot of them were surprised.
They were in awe of hearing your story and very, very excited to hear it. So how do you hope your story impacts those who hear, those who have already heard it and those who will hear it through this program?
I know it might sound a little cliche, but it's really important for me that people see in me before they hear my story or after they hear it that Jesus is the most important thing in my life.
Yeah.
And he is the only reason I am here. And so I hope that hearing my story and hearing kind of my how much it means to me, and that's the background behind it. It's not me. And it just is all about Jesus. And so I just hope that when they hear it, that's what they think of.
So I only have a couple more questions to talk about you sharing your story through the media. So when the media request came to our office, beginning with WDTN in Dayton and then Spectrum News 1 in Columbus, what were your initial thoughts? Were you scared, fearful, excited, something in between?
Yeah. My initial thoughts, I wasn't super eager to jump the gun on sharing it, to be honest. At first I was like, I don't really think I should be doing that. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think I need to. But then after praying about it and, seeking counsel from my parents and people in my life, it just was very clear that, if the Lord is going to set things up and make it possible to share the story, I think you should take that opportunity and share it and give the glory to the Lord and, use that platform and that opportunity to share the gospel to people, even if it's the people interviewing you or whoever it is. If it's one person, then that's what matters. And so at first, I was fearful and hesitant, but then, once I thought about it and had time to pray about it, it was just very clear to me that, I should do it. And so
when you say it became really clear to you, how did it become clear to you? What did you see? What did you sense? Who spoke to you that said, yeah, this is something I need to do?
A lot of my parents influenced because I was extremely hesitant. I was like, I'm not the person for this. I don't really want to be that person, kind of on a pedestal, like, look at me and listen to my story. And so just talking to them and we're all praying about it. They made it very clear, the Lord wouldn't let something like this happen and get so far and all these opportunities keep coming up to do it if he didn't want it to happen. It would be very clear if we were doing the wrong thing. And so all the opportunities that we'll talk about came up and just kept coming up. And so just the peace that I had before I let you guys know, I do want to do this. It was just that made it very clear to me that I was making the right decision.
Right. So you did local, for our listeners and viewers, Hayley did local TV, she did regional TV. And then there was a day, I remember, and I got a call from CBS Evening News, and Nora O'Donnell wanted to have you on as in a special segment. So when I called you, Hayley, I sensed that you were probably got a tear in your eye or started to cry a little bit. Tears of joy, tears of fear. What were your thoughts when you heard that the CBS Evening News wanted to share your story?
Yeah. There were definitely tears of joy.
You were crying, right?
Oh yeah, I was bawling.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very, it was a raw emotion because at first I wasn't aware of who was asking me. It was just, you called me and asked, when are you available? But I didn't know at first.
I tried to keep it quiet because I knew it was a big deal. I didn't want to scare you.
And so I knew I was like curious. And so I asked you and you told me that. And that's kind of when that emotion was let out. And so I was on the phone and my mom was standing right across from me. And so she was kind of like, what are you talking about? And so I start to cry and then she's just crying because I'm crying, but doesn't know why yet.
Yeah.
And so, I tell her and it was, I think I wasn't even expecting myself to cry. So I was shocked too that I was so emotional. But I think it was just that feeling that, just like I said before, just knowing that the Lord has a purpose in my life. And it kind of felt like that little moment that you told me that I was going to do this, or I had the opportunity to, it kind of became real for me. Like, oh my goodness, this might be one of those purpose moments that I'm here for, that I get to go on national news and share my story and I can share the gospel with the person interviewing me. And, hopefully that makes it in there. And I did. And it was just one of those moments for me and then my family too. Like, it was just one of those like, wow, this might be one of those reasons that I'm still alive and healthy and able to do all these things.
So Hayley, you've been working at Nationwide Children's for the last month at the time of this recording. How has the adjustment been, the acclimation to working full-time as a nurse in the NICU unit there? Yeah,
the transition between, so I used to be an intern last summer there.
While you were a student at Cedarville?
Yes, while I was a student. So from last May to about August, I was an intern. And then right before I was coming in for my senior year here, I switched to being a patient care tech. So that just means that I would work alongside a nurse and kind of help the unit. And so I did that all through my senior year and then up until took my licensure exam, and now I'm a nurse. So the transition between my old role and now the new role of being the nurse, has actually been fairly easy to start. I know eventually it will definitely get difficult, but the transition alone has been really good for me. And so a lot of the patients on the unit have been there for an extended amount of time. And so they knew me in my old role, and now they knew me in my new one. So it's been interesting and encouraging too to see them, see me in this different light and trust me, even knowing that I'm new at this. And so it's been really encouraging, and it's been really fun so far.
How do they respond to seeing the new Hayley nurse compared to what you did before? Were they confused, or how did they adjust?
Yeah. A lot of them that knew me in the old role, they usually kind of know that some of us were in school, and so some of us were working to be nurses. So some of them aren't surprised, and then some of them are a little surprised, and I have to explain, I was in school, and this is my new job now. And so, but everyone's been incredibly encouraging and supportive. So
I'm curious. Let's bring in your education a little bit. So. You've just graduated last year from Cedarville with a degree in nursing. From your education, from your practical experience that you've have gained, what does it take to be a quality NICU nurse?
I think definitely even the past couple weeks of me starting and just knowing what I learned here at Cedarville, you have to have compassion for more than just the patient you're caring for, especially in the NICU. Those patients are there for a long time, and it's kind of a life change for them. Some of them move states just to make sure that they can be there for their baby. And so knowing that you have to take care of also the parents or the siblings.
Right.
And so you have to be able to have a different level of compassion as a nurse, understanding, that this is their life every single day. I get to walk away from it for 4 days a week or whatever it is. But this is their everyday life. And so Cedarville really, really taught me. I mean, I know I have a different background, just with my faith that definitely plays a part in it.
Yeah.
But you have to just be so much more compassionate than you ever realized you have to be.
Yeah, and that's what intrigues me. I have to believe, and you just touched on it a little bit, but that your worldview, your faith in Jesus has to play a key role, because, I mean, anyone can be kind and compassionate for a little bit of time, but you always have to be kind and compassionate. Yeah. How do you find that strength? How do you find that compassion through your faith?
Yeah. It definitely brings it out in me when I'm at work, and it can be a very stressful environment for families or coworkers.
Sure.
And so just being able to show my faith with not publicly declaring it, just by my speech and how I talk to the families, and don't let like the stress of it affect me in the way that I'm extremely overwhelmed with the family or the situation, and just being able to show that level of Jesus's compassion for me and kindness to me, and being able to just reciprocate that and show it to the family, no matter how I'm being treated as the nurse. It's not about me. These people need Jesus just as much as I do. Yeah. And so being able to show them that through the way that I treat their kid and stuff like that.
Yeah. So a book that I'm reading this year this year is New Morning Mercies by Paul David Tripp. He's always talking about grace.
Yeah.
And that's really what you're saying. The grace that the Lord has given you, you get the opportunity to show that grace to families on a daily basis. And the families are in great need when you're with them. So, Hayley, you mentioned in some of the TV interviews that you're now working with some doctors and some nurses who you worked with as an intern, but possibly even as when you were in the NICU unit way back when you were an infant. That seems very compelling to me. What is it like for you to work with these medical professionals who you have really sometimes a long-standing connection with?
Yeah. It's definitely encouraging for me. Being in the new role, it can be a little intimidating sometimes.
I would think so.
But just knowing I already have the background of already working there, and then now everybody knows the story behind why I wanted, be in this job.
Yeah.
That can also be intimidating too. So it's definitely been fun to work with the people that I worked with last summer. But then also some of those people, we've kind of done the math, and they were patient care technicians when they were in college, and now they're nurses. And so they were like, I can guarantee you I was, working there that time you were there. So it's definitely been fun and exciting to work with them, and just know that we all have that, common background with either working there in school, or they think that they might have been there at that time. So.
Yeah. So we've shared a lot on the podcast, but we haven't really shared the story yet. And that's what I want to go to in our final 10, 15 minutes on the podcast. So let's go back to the very beginning. Share with us what you learned about your birth. You were born at 24 weeks. And then ultimately, not at Nationwide Children's, but you were sent there.
Yes.
So what do you know about your birth? And share with our listeners that story, because that's really compelling.
Yeah. So I've shared it through all the interviews and stuff, but I knew from as early as I could, comprehend or even remember. I've always known about my story and just kind of how it started. So it was never, something they waited to tell me, or, tried to hide some of the sadness of the story from me. Like, I knew from the very beginning. So, I was born at 24 weeks. And so that's extremely early in the gestational ages that you're supposed to be born.
Right.
And so that comes with a lot of complications, and especially in 2002.
What were some of the complications that you experienced?
Yeah. So just prematurity in general, things are not developed as they would be if you were born at a term or the full term. And so I was a twin, which I do touch on in all the interviews too. So I was an identical twin, or I am an identical twin.
You sure are.
And so my twin lived for 2 days and passed away. And ultimately, it's just because of born so premature, babies can be born together and both premature, but it varies, how different babies handle it. So being, like I said, not having developed fully, a lot of lung problems. So you have to be intubated to survive when you're born that early. So that can be traumatic for a long-term intubation or ventilation. It can be hard. So that leads to things later on in life.
How much did you weigh at birth?
1 pound, 9 ounces.
1 pound, 9 ounces.
Yes.
How long did you stay in the NICU unit at Nationwide?
So I spent a lot of my time, I believe you touched on it earlier. So I was born at OSU Wexner Medical Center and spent a majority of my time there. And then I had to go to Children's for a heart procedure. So back to things not developing, my heart, there's a place in your heart that is supposed to close typically by itself. And it didn't. And so I had to get a heart surgery at Children's.
At how soon?
I couldn't tell you the exact time, but it was roughly, at least I would say roughly a couple weeks after. It was very early on in the process. So I had my heart surgery at Children's, and typically you would stay there just because, you had that, and they would just let you stay there. And my family decided to go back to OSU just because of, primary nurses being there, and they just kind of felt like they knew the people at OSU better. And so how long were you at the NICU unit? A couple of months, weren't you? So at Children's, I was there for about a couple of weeks. Yes. And then I transferred back to OSU. Okay.
And how long were you at OSU then?
Total, I would say at least 2.5, close to 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when you were able to go home, you still had complications. What were some of those complications?
Yes. So I went home, and then usually you have to go home on some sort of oxygenation. Okay. And so I went home on nasal cannula, which is just a very low grade oxygenation. It's nothing major. That's pretty typical for NICU babies, oftentimes to go home on that. And so I went home on that, and that's something that my parents, they were educated on, and they knew how to take care of me at that point. And then later on in life, things developed that could be contributed to the prematurity. And so.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit ago about your twin sister passing. What was her name? And when you heard the story that you had a twin, what was your reaction? How difficult was that?
So her name was Hillary May. So we were both H and M. My name's Hayley Morgan. So we had matching names. And I honestly don't remember the first time I was ever told about her. But I mean, I can remember growing up always, saying, yeah, I have a twin. And sometimes, I mean, people have asked me growing up kind of how that makes me feel. And I don't think I ever really felt the weight of it until I actually started going to nursing school and
really? Okay.
Learning about all these and then working in the NICU, it really, put it into perspective, how devastating it must have been for my parents and just really understanding the weight of all of that. And so I would say growing up, it was definitely influential for me to know, I had an identical twin. But I would never say I was sad about it because I think I always understood that, the Lord didn't want her to live. I don't know why. Right. It doesn't make sense to me. But for some reason I'm here and I have gone through all these things, yet I'm still here. So there must be some purpose and reason behind it. And I just have to be able to trust and know that he's still sovereign, even though I don't have an identical living twin.
So when you think of your twin, does that give you some motivation? Does that just help you in any way? Or is it just like, it was a very sad situation and it was what it was and I'm just moving on from here?
Yeah. It definitely gives me some motivation. Just, I think it helps me better understand some parents sometimes. Because some of them are in the same situation. They had twins and lost one and have another. So I think it does definitely give me some motivation to try to understand families and their grief and their sadness and kind of how that comes off for them. But it definitely is something that I honestly don't think about every day.
Right.
But it's something that, when it comes up and I'm reminded, oh yeah, that did happen to me. Yeah. I remember wow, the Lord is just so good because I don't know why he did that and why I'm still here, but yet I still get to be here and, sharing my story with you.
Yeah. So it's very difficult, I'm sure, for your parents to lose a child. Have you been, as a nurse, been put in a position where you've had to be with a family that has lost an infant? Has that time come yet, or is that something down the road?
So I have not experienced yet, the active, they're losing their baby right now. I have not experienced that yet, but I have experienced families. I have cared for them, and then, I'm not working. Even when I was a student here at Cedarville and I was the tech, I have experienced, babies being there, and then I go back to work and they're not there anymore. Yeah. And I have experienced families they have a living twin, and then the twin passed away last week. So I have experienced that. And it's something that I would have never guessed, growing up. You don't think about that. That's part of the job that you want to do. But it's something that I feel like I was well prepared for, both from learning from Cedarville and being taught in the nursing program here and kind of how to deal with those things. Yeah.
Let's go back to your childhood as we begin to wrap up today's program. As I said earlier, as a young child, you still had complications. And so right around you're 8 years old, you were diagnosed with scoliosis and needed to wear a back brace until high school. And then you needed spinal fusion surgery?
Yes.
So that's not normal for everyday kid.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like, and how did you deal with another opportunity to be somewhat different than your friends?
Yeah. I remember specifically the first appointment we had with the back brace guy, I would call him.
The back brace guy, okay.
I don't remember like learning, oh, I have scoliosis. That's the first memory I have.
Okay.
And I remember going and, being fitted for it. I was not happy at all. I didn't want to be different. I knew it was going to be painful too, and I did not want to do it. But that's the first memory I have of, learning something's going to be different. And then over the years, of course, having to, go get refitted because you're growing up. So
right.
You have to go get refitted. And I ended up having 3 total.
How many years did you have to wear the brace?
So I wore it from 8 years old until the surgery, and I was 16 at the surgery.
So in your interviews earlier, I heard you say that it was a life-changing surgery because the Lord taught you a lot of lessons through that. What were those lessons?
Yeah, it was definitely, I'm not one to rely on others very well. And so it was something that I had to learn very quickly that I couldn't do it on my own.
Okay.
And especially recovery back at home, I have to ask for help. I have to rely on others. And it was just something that I had to learn very quickly because I couldn't, I was in pain. I couldn't move as much as I used to. And so it's something that I had to learn quickly.
So when we think of a normal person, a normal child, when did life get normal for you, maybe for the first time?
I would say it felt like, okay, things are finally dying, getting back to normal. I would say about a year after the surgery, because a year after is kind of your complete recovery.
So it's like your senior year in high school?
So it was my sophomore year in high school.
Sophomore year.
Yes, because I got my surgery going into freshman year.
Okay.
So I would say probably about the end of freshman year, beginning of sophomore year of high school is when I started, being able to go back to sports like regularly and actually being able to do everything.
What did you play?
I did cheer.
Okay.
So I did competitive cheer, football cheer, and basketball. So I participated my freshman year, but, didn't really get to do much. And so I would say sophomore year, I felt, things are going back to normal.
So sophomore, junior, senior, there were no restrictions. You were just a normal student. You were Hayley Good.
Yep. And
you could do anything. How freeing was that for you? Because you've had so many restrictions all your life.
Yeah, it was definitely freeing, I would say. Yeah, because growing up with that back brace, it was very obvious.
Right.
And when you have scoliosis, if you're looking really hard at somebody, which for me, it wasn't very hard because, everything's crooked, you can tell something's off.
Right.
And especially with the back brace, I remember growing up and just as a girl being very self-conscious about it. And so finally being able to, not have to worry. I have perfect posture. I don't have to worry about posture ever again because it's, fused and perfect. I would say it was very freeing and I was very happy about it. So,
how did your friends treat you, or even just classmates treat you? Did you get ridiculed, or did you have a lot of good support?
No, that's the thing. I never experienced anything. I guess you'd say bullying.
Right.
I never ever experienced that. Even in like elementary school and middle school, I never experienced anything like that. And so my classmates and then of course my friends all knew about it, that I was close to, and they were incredibly encouraging, and people visited me at home, and I never experienced anything negative.
So it's time that you graduate from high school and you're looking to go to college. I heard you say you knew you wanted to be a nurse, so you were going to study nursing.
Yes.
What made you want to enroll in Cedarville's nursing program? Because there's a lot of nursing programs you could pursue.
So when it came time to look at colleges, I knew about Cedarville.
Okay.
And I knew going into a higher education, I wanted something that was I wasn't going to stray from the Lord.
Okay.
And I never thought, I would, but I wanted to prepare myself, the best I could, going into college and then ultimately adult life. And so I picked Cedarville just because I knew that Christ was at the center of everything that we do here.
Right.
And that is the reason that we're all here, and that Cedarville is even able to be a university. And the nursing program keeps that at the center of their education. And so just hearing students, I came from for a nursing preview day. And that day I heard students that were students currently talking about their experiences and, how in their lectures, it's not just you're learning about the body, but you're learning about what God created and how he created it, and how awesome is that. And so, just knowing that I was going to be learning about his creation and about the body and everything that comes in the medical field, knowing that Christ is at the center of it and the professors also have that relationship with him as well, is the reason I picked it.
I would have to think that everything that you went through just was reinforced by what you were studying, not just nursing, but your Bible classes. Is that true?
Yes. Everything that I learned at Cedarville, I would be sitting in class sometimes and be like, guys, like, how awesome is this that the Lord did this? Or, learning about something medically and being like, oh my goodness, like, how am I even here?
Yeah.
And then in my Bible classes, just learning about the Bible and theology is just incredibly encouraging, and something that I get to carry on through now my adult life and things that I learned here.
So when people hear your story, whether that's in the interviews you've already done, this podcast, or you just sharing your story to someone who's heard it and wants to hear more, how do you hope people will respond?
I think when people see this story, I think that's the reason why I feel like it's gotten a little bigger than we expected it to.
It has.
Just because people don't think that I would have such a happy, personality after all these things.
Right.
I would like to think that's why people are a little shocked by it. I just hope that when they hear the story and they see, where I went to school even, just seeing that the Lord and Jesus is the only reason that I get to tell this story.
Yeah.
And I went to this school not just because it's a great school, but, the background that you guys have here is Jesus.
Right.
And that's the purpose of everything. And so I just hope when they see it and they hear it, or they hear this, that they just know that the Lord loves them too.
Yeah.
And, you don't think that if you have something happen to you, you don't think that the Lord, is sovereign through that, but he is.
Right.
And I feel like I've experienced that myself. And it's something that once you experience it, you get to share it. And I think that's very influential.
Yeah, you have a great platform and a great story to share. So my final question is, have you been given the opportunity, or have you seen opportunities and taken those to share your faith in Jesus as a result of what you've shared with us today?
Yeah, I definitely have. Whether it's been before all of this or after, even just with coworkers or people, I've met people that have recognized me from the interviews.
Seriously.
And
okay.
so, and it's been very few, but even then it's like, that's just shocking. Like, why is that happening to me?
Right.
But being able to say yes, that is me. And even if it's a very short interaction, knowing that they saw the story and that they could look Cedarville up and know, oh, she went to a Christian school. Just hearing the story and knowing that my faith and how important it is to me is just, it's been very exciting.
Well, our time is up, but I want to thank you for being willing to share your story with us for the very first time months ago, and allowing us to use the human amplification to share it broadly, because it's giving you a great platform here in Ohio, across the country, and with the podcast across the world. So thank you for joining me this week on the podcast. It's great to be with you again.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Cedarville Stories Podcast, brought to you by Cedarville University. Be sure to come back next week when we'll share another Cedarville story for God's glory.